Today is May 1st, 2009. I am Andrea Mott. It is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Fargo, North Dakota. Can you please state your full name?
Victor Traugut Knell. I don't think you've ever heard that middle name, have you? It means trust God, Traugut in German.
When and where were you born, Victor?
I was born on 23rd of August, 1941 in Hazen, North Dakota.
Have you ever heard an interesting story about your birth?
Can't say that I have. I was there, but I don't remember it.
Please share some of your earliest memories with us.
Well, I guess the earliest memories would basically be on the home farm. Growing up as a child, a farm kid, going out and working in the garden, and Mom had a big garden all the time. Of course, we milked cows, so I can remember fairly early that we were out there pulling the teats and getting milk, this type of thing. I always had plenty to do, so but I can't think of any memories that basically stick out. They're just one of those things that you basically live through it, and was that type of thing.
What was life like on a farm, growing up on a farm?
Well, I mean, we wouldn't know anything else. I mean, it was basically, I thought it was a good life, and I think it still was. And we were all had plenty to eat and this type of thing. It was and always, of course, we always complained about having to do this and that, working, and of course we had plenty of chores. So it's other than that, I don't know that it was very interesting than that. I mean, we entertained ourselves doing, TV and whatever. We had radios on, of course, but no TV until many years later. In fact, I think I first saw my first television when I was in high school. Of course, this was before your time, because you guys' time anyway. So it was. But there's been a lot of changes in my lifetime. And I don't think I'm that old, but it's it's been basically. Yeah. We had when we were a kid, we had no car until 1948. We always used the farm truck was the vehicle that was used for transportation.
And did you always live on the farm?
Yes. Well, until I went into service in the 60s, yes. Since then, I've been got around some, ended up in service, and then in Germany and whatever.
Now, you mentioned chores.
Yes.
What kind of chores did you do on the
farm?
farm?
You had to gather the eggs, feed the hogs, milk the cows, feed the chickens, of course. In the summertime, of course, in the garden, you'd probably end up hoeing weeds and whatever. So this type of thing. And I mean, it's just chores. It's the type of thing you, as a kid, and which I don't think anybody does anymore. I'm sure most of you people, if I mention some of these things, they don't even know what I'm talking about. So it's kind of strange sometimes when you talk to a young person and you mention something which you think is so basic, and just basically blank out on you. They have no idea what you're talking about. It's kind of interesting.
Did you have a favorite chore that you were supposed to do?
I don't know that. I don't think so. We just had to get them done and work on them.
When you say we, you mean you and your
Well,
siblings?
our siblings, my siblings, yeah. I had a sister and two brothers, 4 of us kids. My sister is closer to my age. She was about 2 years younger.
You said you complained about working.
Well, I mean, I guess you always tend to do that. You think you were getting picked on because you had to do some hoeing or clean the barn or whatever, this type of thing. It's we all tend to complain, whatever. I mean, whatever. Even if we have jobs, we complain because we had to do something that we didn't think was really part of the deal or whatever. So yeah, you always. I mean, what would life be life be like if you couldn't complain? It would be no fun at all.
You also said it was a good life and you had plenty to eat. Did you all raise?
Well, yeah, we
farm
raised
your own
pretty much
food?
everything. I mean, we'd get buy sugar and flour, but pretty much everything else we raised. We had the milk and the eggs and the pork, the hogs, the beef from butchering cattle. And then Mom always had a big garden, so we always had plenty of vegetables, potatoes, whatever. So it was, I mean, there was never any shortage of things to eat.
What was a typical meal like with your family?
Well, there's usually some meat or potatoes, always potatoes, some vegetables, uh, bread and butter. Of course, that was always part of it. You always had pickles. Mom made a lot of pickles. Uh, Nothing fancy. We didn't, as a rule, drink coffee unless we had company. So we always drank milk because we had a lot of dairy cattle. So we did milk. Even, and in fact, I don't remember Mom ever drinking coffee. Even when she was, when there was company there, she never drank coffee. So coffee was not something we drank until I remember the first time drinking coffee probably in the army. So coffee was not normally part of the deal, but we always drank milk.
So it was a luxury item for you then.
Well, it wasn't necessarily a luxury. It was just not. I don't know. We just didn't use much of it. Our neighbors did. I mean, they always had coffee, but we never. Like I say, since Mom never drank it, so basically it was never made unless there was company there. Then she'd make coffee. Of course, her sister she later said she made terrible coffee. She probably did because she never drank it.
What was the most favorite dish that you remember your mother making?
Well, yeah, some of the German-Russian dishes, probably like, I think the Krautkitli, we'd call them, I'm sure there's a lot of names for it, but find it in some of the German cookbooks, I'm sure.
Can you spell that?
Well, it's Kraut, Kraut. Well, I'd have to look it up in the book. And Kitle would be, this little pie, like a turnover type thing. So, but I'd have to look it up in the book to spell it correctly. And then you have Fleischkitle, again, which was a meat turnover, which is deep fried. The Krautkittle was baked. So that was, but everybody seemed to like that. And she used to make extras in later years and then freeze them and then, just unthaw them and they'd be good, for a good meal, this type of thing.
Was that something she would make for company?
No, usually for the family.
You mentioned TV first coming out when you were in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe high school for us? What it was like for you?
Well, we of course, as farm kids, we drove into town every day, and there was 4 of us. We'd alternate. 1 week, this guy would drive. The next week, this guy would drive, and so on. Wintertime, if the weather got bad, we'd stay in town at my grandparents'. But yeah, it was basically just had graduated from 8th grade out in the country school, and then the high school. And all of a sudden, you were going to a big school comparatively, because I think at country school probably the most people you ever had was about 15 people. My class in high school graduated, I think, 38, which was fairly small. I mean, because later years they were much bigger than that. But went to all the different classes and football games, basketball games, this type of thing. Nothing that stands out that I can say was that special about it.
Were there any after-school activities that you participated in?
We usually went home because we had chores to do and this type of thing. Sometimes we may, later after class may go, because there may have been a ball game or this type of thing. Because football games were normally in during the school hours, but the basketball we may drive into town. I don't know. Remember that I went to too many parties. I don't recall doing that much of that. We always had, like I say, had plenty of chores at home to do after school or even before school.
Can you describe a typical school day?
Well, we'd get up in the morning, of course, and milk the cows before we went to school. We were part of the family doing that. Then we'd end up driving to school, and then a class day, of course. And of course, noon we'd normally take our lunch along. I don't think we ever ate in school. And of course, in the afternoon, and basically until like I say, I don't recall that there was anything that special about the school day. That it was, at the city study and whatever, this type of thing. So afterwards, of course, there's always some homework and whatever involved too. But I would guess the school day is probably still like that.
Well, you said you took your lunch along.
Yeah.
What did you take it in?
Well, in a bag probably, or even just in a lunch bucket, whatever.
What was grade school like for you?
Well, the grade school was about a mile and a quarter from home to the west of us. Was the like I say, at most time we had probably the largest number of students at the school was about 15. Normally we were around 8 or so. Of course, this was a one-room school. We had all the grades from 1 on up to 8. Again, in the morning, sometimes we drove to school, but mostly we walked. And of course, the evening going home. I don't know what anything special about the class. I mean, of course, you had all the classes together, so whatever class was going on, you as a student heard. So you basically, a first grader, you heard what the eighth graders were doing, and of course, and the same thing was in reverse too. So it was always you were basically in everybody's taking the whole whatever was going on, you were part of. So I don't know that was anything special. Of course, we had, always when we had recess, of course, you went out and played, did games and whatever. Sometimes play baseball, whatever turned you on.
What kind of outside activities did you play with your classmates?
Well, we had, the different games. So then pom-pom polo, I don't know if you ever heard of it. Fox and goose in the wintertime, you make a big circle in the snow, and then you make like a big wheel, and you go try to catch each other, this type of thing. Pom-pom polo again was a game where you had two ends, and you'd go from one side to the other. Of course, the guy who was he would try to catch, and of course, as people were caught, they ended up, in the middle catching other people. So by the end of the game, there was a lot of people in the middle, not many people left that could run and get away from everybody. So it was kind of that type of thing. And then you played cat and mouse. I don't know if you've ever done that, where you threw a ball over the roof and then the other side to catch it, this type of thing. So, of course, a lot of things I've forgotten.
Did you have a favorite?
I can't say that it was any special. I mean, we did whatever the majority wanted to do, pretty much. Again, we had all the classes, so you had from the first graders on up to eighth graders taking part. So.
Now, did you have a favorite subject?
History was always my favorite subject, and it still is to this day. I love history. I like to read history and whatever went on way before my time.
Now, you mentioned that during bad weather you'd stay with your grandparents in town. Can you describe what that was like?
Well, like I said, we took. We knew we were going to stay with grandparents. Of course, we took food along so that she wouldn't have to basically feed us. So we basically brought enough along to cover what they ate and what we ate. So then we'd basically stay overnight with them, and go to class in the morning, come home at noon. We'd eat at Grandma at noon, of course. She was a very good cook, so it was very good. So we had plenty of food and whatever. But I think they enjoyed it, Grandma and Grandpa, that when we were there, because then they had the variety of things to do and whatever. But like I said, that's when the first time I saw Grandpa had gotten a television. So if you remember back then, the big thing was wrestling on television at that time. Nothing else seems to stick out, but that was the big deal. Neighbors would come over because not everybody had a television set. Neighbors would come over and watch.
Now, what was your grandmother like? Is this your maternal or?
It's maternal, yes.
Maternal?
Yeah, my paternal ones lived down the block, a couple of blocks. But yeah, we always stayed with maternal grandparents. Yeah, she was very, very hardworking when she did quilting. She did a little of everything. She was really into things. And in fact, when I started doing my genealogy, she was the one I went to because we sat down basically on Davenport with the photo album and went through it. And of course, as she saw pictures, then she'd remember things, and I was taping it then, so it was kind of interesting. She was always a very active person because she was always making quilts, and his grandchildren were born or whatever, so they ended up with a quilt, or somebody got married, they got a quilt, type of thing. She was always quilting, and like I say, a very good cook. She always did that type of thing. And she made other things too, but that was, the quilts were the big deal.
Do you still have a quilt that maybe
I
she
think
made
I
you?
do, probably under here somewhere.
Did she have a favorite dish that you would enjoy?
No, I don't know. She was just everyday cooking as far as I was concerned.
How about your grandfather? Can you describe him?
Well, the Grandpa Ada was quite tall, and I don't know that we ever got. I mean, we visited with him, but there was never that much camaraderie between our grandparents and ourselves. Grandma was much more open than Grandpa. So, but I mean, there was no problem with him. He was just there as far as I'm concerned.
And what did your grandparents do?
Well, they had been farmers. Yeah, They retired in those years when the older sons took over. They basically moved to town, and they were still quite young actually when they moved to town. So, but they had been farmers just west of where our home farm was.
Do you remember when they moved to town?
No, I don't remember the year. No.
Now, your paternal grandparents, they lived just down the street. Can you describe your grandmother?
Yeah, she was a very small woman, short, but very, very, very did a lot of work. She did, was a very active person. And again, but I know that she was like my paternal, that she did much quilting. She did what do you call that you did with the hooks and this type of knitting. There you go. And knitting and that type of thing. She did a lot of, all these little doilies. She always had doilies all over the place, this type of thing. So Grandpa was completely very much different. He was he had asthma, and of course he was not a very active person. He pretty much sat around, and he did read quite a bit. He had the old German newspapers and this type of thing. Staatsanzeiger, I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Now, were both sets of grandparents German descendants?
Yeah, I'm completely German from Russia. There's nothing else there. Because anybody that tells you that they're pure anything doesn't know what they're talking about. But my background is strictly German from Russia.
Now, did you have any cousins or other family members?
Lots of cousins. Yeah, my parents, of course, if you saw, they were, my dad and mom married, had a double wedding with her sister and his brother. So there was a double wedding. And so I had, and so our family pretty much mirrored their family because we had three boys and a girl, and they had three boys and a girl in that family. My cousin was he was a couple of weeks older than myself. And then I had, and people always confused, mixed us up. Not that we looked that similar, but it was just because both families, the mothers on both sides and dads on both sides were brothers and sisters. There is a lot of similarity there. And then, of course, all of the cousins from my mother's, you know, married sisters and brothers, and my dad's sisters and brothers. So there was quite a slew of cousins, and they were all fairly close in the vicinity. So it was a matter of visiting them every now and then. They came to visit and do this type of thing.
Now, were they also living on farms, or?
Yes, yeah. The only on my dad's side there was one uncle. He was a carpenter. Everybody else, as far as I know, were all farmers. And the same thing on my mother's side. I can't remember. I know they're all farmers there. I can't think of anybody that had any other jobs. My dad's youngest sister was married to a trainman, a railroad man, but no, I'm talking about basically the men were all farmers.
And can you describe a typical day? Maybe not including
what
a typical day on the farm was like?
Well, we usually got up around 5, or then go out. Of course, milk the cows, come in, have breakfast, and of course, if it was a school day, of course, we kids would go to school. If not, you end up doing whatever chores needed to be done that day. As we got older, of course, we ended up doing summer fallow and this type of thing out in the fields, or cultivate corn, which I did a lot of that with the old H International type of thing. And then, of course, in fall, you end up harvesting. We did early on bindering, so we ended up having to set up shocks and this type of thing, and then in the fall, of course, thrash. Of course, as they got a combine, of course, that became less and less of a factor. Well, I think we thrashed, they thrashed even until the 60s. When I went to the service, when I came back, they had pretty much changed. They were no longer thrashing. So, because there was not enough young people around to do the work, type of thing. Because Dad always liked the good straw stack out there, so the cattle had some place to go in the wintertime.
Now, what kind of animals did you have on your farm?
We had pigs, chickens, ducks, geese, dairy cattle. That was about it, I guess.
And what about crops?
Well, we raised wheat, durum later years, flax, barley, oats. I think that's again about it. Corn, of course. Of course, corn then was fed, made into silage and then fed to the cattle.
And what was the difference between farm life and town life for you? What struck? What?
Well, of course, like I said, we always had plenty of chores. You go to town, and these people were basically walking around doing nothing. It kind of irritated us farm kids, I'm sure. So this type of thing, we always had like I say, had our own things to do at home, like, whether milking cows or taking care of chickens or whatever. And these people were basically, walking around, going to the stores and doing whatever. I'm sure some of them had their own jobs, but it was something we just didn't see as being a job or work, let's put it that way.
I'd like to go back to you talking about the double wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe that in a little more detail?
Well, I wasn't there at the time, but yeah. Well, it's like I say, it was my dad and his brother, and then my mother and her sister. You know, they got married in 1940. Of course, I didn't show up until 41, so I wasn't there to. But it was, the typical German wedding, as far as I know. It was held out at the church there, and then they had their thing, I think, at my grandparents, Adolf's grandparents' place, which is not far from the church, the farm. They then went to their own, went to their own farms, and they were given, basically, I guess, from the Adolf side, at least they got, I think, a cow and some chickens and this type of thing, and I don't know what they got from the Knell families. But that was, to get them started on their new way of life. We didn't live right away. The first farm we lived on was about a mile or so south of which is the home farm. And so but again, that was, I really don't have any memories of it because I was just a baby then and a young fellow. And we lived, I think, on a second place before Grandpa Knell basically then sold the farm to my dad, and he took over the home farm, where I spent the most of my life.
Now, you said you left the farm to enter the service. When was that?
Yeah, it was in '61. Yeah, it was after high school, and I had been home. And then my cousin had gone to the service earlier, and it was in the wintertime. I was sitting there, basically not much to do, so I decided it was time to see the world a little bit, I guess. So I went to join the army. Ended up coming here to Fire to get my physical, and from here we went to Fort Carson, Colorado. I don't know if it's still there or not. Carson, down there close to where the Air Academy is, Air Force Academy. And from there, then I went to Fort Dix for my second 8, and then I went to Germany, to München, where I was stationed for 2.5 years.
Now, you were raised speaking German?
Yes.
So
it was a language they did use me as a translator every now and again, but I ended up in Bavaria, which is a different German than I was used to, but I grew up speaking what we call Schwäbisch, which is a dialect that basically comes from the Stuttgart, that general area. But I did get along fairly well, and I did have a lot of I had a lot of German relatives over there who I got to visit, which was kind of interesting to visit. And we had no trouble with the language at all, so it was kind of interesting. But I did, like I say, every once in a while get used as a translator by the military also. And the Germans used to say, well, you understand me real well, so no problem. But it was interesting. I was the first Sunday I was in Munich. On Sunday I went to a German service, and afterwards I visited with some of the congregants, and they recognized my dialect. And my people had left Germany in about 1815 and went to Russia. So my dialect had carried over for, until the 1960s, where they could still recognize where my people came from originally in Germany.
And where was it originally in Germany?
Well, the town would have been southeast of Stuttgart. The town name is Neckartalfingen. It's on the Neckar River down in east Germany. At least that's where the Knells came from. The Osters came from the Palatine, the Palatinate, and my Adolf relatives came from the Berlin area. Then I have the other Breitlings, which is my grandmother's maternal side. They came from Bebling, which also is down in the Black Forest down in southern Germany. I researched all those, so I know what they're from.
Now, which set of grandparents were the first that came over? Do you remember?
The first ones that came over were the Osters, I believe. They came in 1888, and the Adolfs came the following year in '89. The Knells, let's say the Breidlings, which would have been on my dad's mother's side, they came over. I'd have to look at it, but it would have been about 1890, I guess. My grandfather came over in 1902 or 1905. He came in by way of Quebec, and he had his brother had come over in 1902, so it had send him a ticket. So that's what he used to come over. That was a time he came over. The Germans in Russia tended to come over just before a war, a Russian war or something, because they didn't like to serve in the Russian military. And Grandpa came over before the Japanese-Russian war.
Do you remember any holidays or celebrations that you still celebrated, like your grandparents may have celebrated in the old country?
Well, I don't think anything's celebrated like that anymore. I mean, the big thing used to be Christmas and Easter type of thing. I don't know that we were anything that special. I mean, we had when we had the out in the country church, Christmas we'd had German and English services, and of course even when we went to town, we still had some of the German, because we had German service up in Hazen until the 1960s. So it was, and of course Easter, I don't recall that Easter was anything special. It was basically I think the American, I don't think we did anything special as far as having the Easter thing. You had the Easter rabbit like everybody else and this type of thing. So Easter eggs, But I know, like I say, for Christmas it was a big deal because we used to, as kids that were German, we had to learn both an English and a German, verse to say, this type of thing, which, of course, some of the families didn't do that, so it was kind of interesting. And, of course, we sang all the old German Christmas carols and whatever.
What's your favorite Christmas memory?
Well, I guess we had basically, we always had the Christmas evening service, which was the only time that we had an evening service at church, was for the Christmas Eve. And after that, we'd end up usually coming home. Of course, by then Santa Claus had come, So it was that, And I never, some of the Germans later on, we used to say Belzernickel, this type of thing. And I'd never heard of Belzernickel as a thing. And of course, you guys, I'm sure, don't know what I'm talking about. But that was the German equivalent, or not the equivalent, but one of the bad things about being a German Christmas thing was the Belzernickel, because he tended, if you did bad, you got a caning or this type of thing. Which, of course, if you went into German, you'd have the Christkindl rather than Santa Claus, but we always had Santa Claus, so we were not very German in that aspect.
Now, does your family usually celebrate with all of your cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents?
Oh, yeah, always, yeah. Well, even during the week, on Sunday, this was the thing. On Sunday, you'd go to church service. After church, you'd go somewhere. You'd visit. You'd go to somebody for dinner. And that was not set up. That was basically the way you just went. And everybody had prepared or had made supper or dinner that there would be enough for company, this type of thing. That was the way things were done for many years. And now you wouldn't think of doing that, going to somebody's house, all uninvited. But that was the way things were done. Of course, then you'd, sit around and visit. The kids would go and play games and this type of thing.
What kind of games did you play?
Oh, just probably mostly hiding, hiding games, this type of thing. Yeah, baseball, whatever the weather, we had nice weather, you do go out and play ball, this type of thing.
Now, you mentioned church service. What was the typical church service like?
Well, like you say, I grew up, the earliest service that I can remember were in German. So you'd end up, it was a Lutheran service. You'd go to the church, and of course the pastor preached in German. I remember I think it was probably in the late 50s when I remember Pastor Burkhardt, or Pastor, what was his name? I can't think of his name right now. But he started to bring some an English part into the service. And then pretty soon, after a while, there'd be an English service and a German service, alternating Sundays, this type of thing. But you always, you grew up basically speaking German, and in the service, of course, the German service was in Hochdeutsch, High German, which we spoke at home was Schwäbisch was a dialect, so it was not the same thing. But we understood it most pretty well. In fact, I can speak it either one; it makes no difference to me.
Now, did you have any gatherings after church services, or was it just service?
Well, it's basically like you end up going to somebody's house, home for dinner or whatever. Other than that, I can't remember any big gatherings. I mean, there used to be every once in a while, once a year, of course, you had mission festival, the mission, then you have several services during the day, basically to collect a little money and this type of thing. But I don't recall any other special gatherings.
Now, what was the service like as a child? Did you ever get in trouble for being loud, or you and your siblings?
Well, I think we were pretty well behaved in service, because part of the deal is when you were old enough, you ended up sitting on the couple of the front rows, and so you didn't do much misbehaving. Yeah, and even in those days, even a child, if they started crying too much, he might get spanked. That's, of course, you wouldn't hear that being done these days anymore. So kids learn to behave pretty quick.
Now, was the discipline the same way in school when somebody got in trouble? Were they spanked?
Well, there wasn't much spanking done, but you stood in the corner, this type of thing, whatever. Stayed after classes, whatever. I don't remember ever having too much of that, but that was basically it. I remember, sometimes sitting by the blackboard with their nose down the blackboard, this type of thing. All kinds of strange things teachers can come up with, I don't remember any spanking being done when I was in school at all. It was just not. Of course, I think probably some of these students were probably as big as the teacher, so that probably wouldn't have happened too easily.
Now, did you play any sports in high school? You mentioned
No, I did
games,
not.
but did you?
No, I didn't. I really wasn't much into sports. No. Went home and pitched bales, this type of thing.
What about lunch breaks? What was a lunch like for you in high school?
Like I said, we brought our lunch, so we probably ended up going out into the, during the summer, when it was warm, you would sit out in the car and then eat your bag lunch or whatever, your lunch in the lunch pail, whatever. So that type of thing. Nothing special.
So they were pretty lax in where you were allowed to eat?
Yeah. Well, it was just so that you had, I don't know, like I say, yeah, we never brought it into the school in the lunchroom, this type of thing. We always pretty much sat in the car and ate our lunch there. And then after there was you had an hour break, I think. And then, of course, usually we ended up walking downtown and seeing what the new comic books were and this type of thing in the stores.
And do you remember what dating practices were like when you were that age?
I don't know. I really didn't do much dating, so I really can't say anything on that subject. But I know there was couples that had, even from freshman on, were pretty basically a couple, this type of thing. You saw it all the time. But I myself didn't. So it's not my part of my expertise.
I'd like to bring up a little bit more about your siblings. Did you guys get along pretty well?
Well, like all siblings, we had our moments. I guess we usually got along fairly well. My sister was in the nearest to me in age, and then of course my younger brothers. My youngest brother wasn't born until 50, so by that time I was born in 41, so I was fairly good size by that time. But yeah, I think we got along, but as I think if any family you get into, you'll find that they all have their arguments and this type of thing, gripes about this and that and whatever. But mostly, I think we got along.
Let's go to birthdays. How did you celebrate birthdays? How did your parents set those up?
Well, mother had a tendency of celebrating birthdays in batches. If there was somebody that's fairly close to having the same date, you end up celebrating with them or this type of thing. I mean, she'd bake. She was a good baker. She'd bake, angel food cake and frost it and put candles on. And, like you guys blow out the candles, this type of thing. I don't remember ever getting gifts for birthday, this type of thing. That was not part of the deal.
Were you allowed to have friends over for birthdays, or was it just a family?
No, it was usually family or the cousins and whatever. Usually somebody around. I mean, it was not within the family. We normally wouldn't celebrate that. That was normally with a bigger gathering than that.
Now, did you ever share your birthday with your sister or your brothers? Were you close to?
Well, no. I'm in August. My cousin probably, because he was in late July, this type of thing. I probably did that, and of course then my uncle was in August, mother was in September, this type of thing. So whatever, fairly close together, they normally got celebrated as a batch.
Did you sing birthday songs? Did you sing in German? Did you sing in English?
No, we sang Happy Birthday. Other than that, I can't think of anything else being sung. I know there is a German song, but I don't think I even know it.
And can you describe your mother for us?
Well, she was, quite lean. I mean, she was a very, a hard-working person. She had her garden, and of course, she always raised chickens and ducks and geese. Ended up helping, out in the barn, milking cows, this type of thing. Of course, she always did the laundry. She was a hard worker. She did the laundry normally on Wednesday, and she was the first person up before everybody else was still asleep. She'd be up, washing clothes and this type of thing. And she was always the last one to seem to go to bed. So other than that, I can't say much. She was, like I say, a very hard worker and very efficient with her time and this type of thing.
What is your favorite memory of your mother?
I don't know if I can say that I have any favorites. I mean, she had I remember many times when she was doing the laundry, this type of thing, and then later on in the afternoon when she bring it into the, to iron. Sometimes they're visiting with her and this type of thing, sharing some of the family history with her, basically, this type of thing, stories.
What about your father? Can you describe him?
Well, it's like it's just a typical farmer. You go out there and work in the fields. He was, again, a very hard worker. He was was he was only a little shorter than me as far as size goes. I don't know how this guy is hard to say. Well, how would you describe somebody like that? But again, it was basically out. He was out spending time in the fields doing his farm work, and of course the cattle we had milking cows and this type of thing.
Now, when you did chores, did you split those up between you and your siblings? Did you ever make any?
No, it was we were pretty much assigned what we were to do, this type of thing, depending on what you could handle, what you could deal with. So that's as you grew older and bigger, stronger, you did you milked more cows and fed the pigs and this type of thing, or whatever you could deal with. And it was you dealt basically with what you were able to handle as your age and your strength allowed. But we pretty much all knew what we were going to be doing, this type of thing. It was just I'm sure we were told every now and then, you go do this and do that, whatever. But we had chores that we knew were ours, this type of thing.
Was it ever fun? Was it always just work, or was it ever fun?
Well, I don't know that. You do it and you'll be done with it, and of course you were glad you were done, this type of thing. That great joy about it. It was just one of the things you had to do.
Can you describe your farm, perhaps your farmhouse, where you were raised?
Well, it was. We had. In fact, we lived basically lived in the. We had the farm was the house was built into a hill, so we could walk into the basement from the outside. In fact, we pretty much lived. Did living. We lived downstairs. All the cooking and everything was downstairs. The beds were upstairs, and that type of thing. The parlor was upstairs, so some company would go up there. But we pretty much lived downstairs in the basement. But like I said, it was not a typical basement because you could walk in from outside. This type of thing. It's just I remember in the earliest years because we had no refrigeration or any type of. We always had a well in the house, so we always had running water, basically from the pump. But of course, if you to the bathroom, you had to go outside to the outhouse, and it was not till they built a new house that you had an indoor toilet, this type of thing.
Do you remember how old you were when that change happened?
Well, it happened while I was in the service. I was not at home when that happened at all. So it was in the 60s when the new house was built. But during that time, I was in the military. So I came back to a new house when I came back to the farm.
Okay, we were talking about your living in the farmhouse and growing up out in that farmhouse. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it was set up in the side of the hill? You said with the outhouse and.
Yeah, well, I was outside. Yeah. Well, you had basically the kitchen table where everybody sat down as a family. Mom's had the stove over here on the cupboard and whatever. of course, she had, you know, a nice, what do you call it, a cellar where you know, the the potatoes and the eggs and whatever were kept in the cooler area. So she, I mean, I don't think there's anything special about it. It was set up, like I said, the sleeping area, we were upstairs. That was up. The bedrooms were in the first story. But basically, we lived downstairs. Did all our living down there, other than for the sleeping. So, but like I don't don't think there was anything special about the setup as far as that goes. I mean, it was the old cook stove with the, you know, coal stove that was used for cooking. I think Mom, not until they got to the new house that they got Mom got an electric stove. Or refrigerator. We had a freezer, and in later years we had a freezer. You know, Mom always did a lot of butchering. You know, we always had ducks and geese, and extra baking was always in there. You know, the bread, whatever. She did a lot of baking and this type of thing.
Can you describe how she would butcher the animals?
Well, you know, of course, during the summertime when you get the pullets, you know, as they grew up, you know, ended up used to take the chickens and chop their heads off, and then got them, you know, defeather them and this type of thing. And then, of course, that was the dinner then, you know, the chickens. And later, of course, after in the fall, of course, things got killed in mass. You know, they would be frozen then or canned. Mom did a lot of canning. All the chickens, the geese and ducks would be then, you know, the people. It wasn't just the family, but people would come, like my grandparents may come, you know, they spend a day butchering, you know, and then, you know, basically killing the ducks, geese, you know, plucking them and, you know, scald, and then they got it, and then, of course, Mom would deal with as far as the canning and whatever. Same thing with the pigs and pork, or the beef, when we made sausage and this type of thing. Again, this would be neighbors would come, or not neighbors necessarily, but some of the uncles and aunts would come over, and they'd spend a day butchering, you know, killing the pigs and whatever, the beef, and then of course they'd be ground and made into sausage, or as you Germans say, a wurst type of thing. Several different varieties of that. So always, like I say, it was always had plenty to eat. This type of thing. So it was always Mom had to make sure that we had stocked up for whatever the coming year.
Now, how did your family keep the house warm in winter?
We had a furnace, you know, just a regular coal furnace that was the warming. I can't remember that we ever got cold. It was a matter of stocking, you know, getting the furnace full of coal, and then, you know, banking in the evening, so that it wouldn't be cold by morning. But this type of thing, we always had, you know, we had a big furnace in the downstairs that we used to warm. Of course, during the day when Mom was cooking on the cook stove, we really didn't need much from that.
How about keeping it cool during the summers?
You opened the window or the door, this type of thing. You know, there was no air conditioning in those days. I don't remember ever seeing a fan either until many years later. But it was just a matter you suffered. But you opened the doors and windows, this type of thing. You know, keep the screen doors so that the flies wouldn't come in. Because you always tended to have plenty of flies too, you know, that come in as people open the doors, whatever. So you always had your fly swatter around, you know, to kill the flies.
Now, you mentioned you slept up in the upstairs
Mm-hmm.
of the house. Did you share rooms with your siblings?
Yes.
Or how was that set up?
Well, in the early years, we slept, you know, basically with us kids. And in the later years, as I got older, my uncle lived with us. I slept with him, in the bed with him, until he got married, in fact. So Yeah, I don't remember ever having a bed to myself, not until later, much later in life. So I was always sharing a bed with something. As kids, well, at the times there was probably three of us in the bed. But then, like I say, when they got older, then uncle and I shared a bed.
Who lived in your home when you were growing up?
Well, there's dad and mom, and of course then my sister and brother and myself. Well, later, I mean, they were by, of course, until the youngest. But our uncle always lived with us. He was I think 17 years older than myself. But he lived with us as long as I can remember until he got married in the, I don't know when that was, I'd have to look it up, but he got married in later, during the, I suppose in the late 50s. And then he went and set up his own farm, but he was part of the family for as many years as I can remember. And, but there was, like I said, I was always, us four kids, and then my uncle, and of course mom and dad.
And when did he move in with you?
He always was
He
there.
always was
Yeah,
there.
he was, like I say, he was the youngest in the family, and he basically stayed with the farm. When Dad took over the farm, he came with the farm, basically. Ended up living with us. But like I say, must have been about 17 years older than myself. So that, he wasn't that much older than the rest of us. So it wasn't that. So he's always basically part of the family.
How long did your family reside in this house?
Well, they lived there until, like I say, I was in the army in the '60s when they built a new house, which was just behind, in the garden. It was behind the old house was, and that old house then was sold and was moved away. But when I came back from being in the army, they had a new house. So, but we'd had lived in two other locations before we came to the Knell farm.
Where were those?
Those were the one farm is about a mile south of the Knell farm, and the other one would have been basically just to the about a half a mile or a quarter of a mile to the east of the farm. There was a house there at one time, and of course it's no longer there. But that's where we lived for a very short time. Then after that, then Dad moved in. We moved to the Knell home farm. I spent the rest of my life there. I mean, till the army, when I basically, from there on, I went out my way to other places.
Now, when your family moved, do you remember why they moved?
Well, they were just renting, these farms, and that was just. But I have no idea why they moved, but probably because they couldn't, probably the rental agreement or something, whatever. But it was not something that I'm aware of what the problems were, or if there were any.
Now, you mentioned an outhouse. I want to go back and discuss that for a second. Where was that located in relation to the actual house?
Well, it was, I suppose, 100 yards or so to the north of the house. A little walk, we had some rocks that we, pathway out there. And of course, you went out there winter and summer. So in the wintertime, you didn't spend as much time there as you normally would have. Of course, in the summertime, it could get, fairly pretty strong smelling out there too. But we didn't know any better.
Can you describe the building that was the outhouse?
Well, it was just a little, it was a two-holer. Yeah, I remember what that is. We had, the bench in there with two holes, and, smaller and a bigger hole, so you need company or whatever. But we always, and, for dinner, and of course we did have toilet paper on. Sometimes we had used some catalogs or whatever with the softer pages, but normally we had toilet paper, so it wasn't that bad. But like I said, it wasn't that comfortable in the cold winter to go out there and perch on the thing out there.
Can you please tell us about the baths that you took when you were a kid?
Well, as a bath, you took a bath once a week, whether you needed it or not. This type of thing. We had a big galvanized tub, that we filled up with water, and that was the bathtub. And it was, like I say, it was on Saturday. Saturday we'd go and take our bath and be ready and clean for Sunday.
Now, was there an order that you took baths in, or?
Yeah, it was usually from the youngest to the oldest.
Do you remember what kind of soap you used? Did you make the soap, or?
Well, Mom made soap, but basically the soap Mom made, she used for laundry. So we'd use Ivory or Camay, whatever, almost whatever was probably on sale at the store. So I don't think we had any special favorites or whatever. It was just Mom did the buying, and we used what she provided us with.
How did you heat the water for the bath?
on a canner on the cold stove. You've seen those canners. That's where the water was. Filled that up with water, and that was heated and dumped into the
How often did you change the water?
We didn't. I would think by the last time it wasn't, of course there's always water added, so it was more diluted. So I don't know that we were especially, but it was never emptied until we were all done.
How often were you supposed to brush your teeth?
Well, we brushed, after meal. I mean, basically at breakfast and at supper. I think I don't know that we did much brushing at noon, but we brushed our teeth pretty much, twice a day or so.
Can you tell us a little bit about community life?
Like what?
Like town life, when you would go to town.
Well, we go to town. I remember as a kid, probably once, on the weekends, like on Saturday night, it was a big thing to go to town. You'd go to shop, and the stores would all be open. And of course, sometimes as kids would go to a movie or this type of thing. But it was a matter of going to the stores and visiting with all the whole neighborhood was basically in town on Saturday nights. So it was, you visited with whoever you saw in the town, this type of thing. Hazen at that time, I think, had 3 stores. So they'd go probably and do shopping in all 3, depending on what the prices were, because they'd look and, they were pretty looked at what the costs were and whatever, and then you bought whatever was cheaper, this type of thing, because you basically took your eggs along, and then you used your egg money to buy your groceries.
Now, when you went into town on Saturdays, did they have any kind of dances that you would go to with others?
I don't remember any dances on Saturday night. It was basically, if you'd go to any time of entertainment, it would probably be to the movie. But basically, it was a visiting. You'd visit with the neighborhood. Whoever was in town. I don't recall any town. I mean, the only dances I can remember basically going to. We had a neighbor at home that had dances on Sunday night. One of our neighbors did, and it was, I think, basically to get a little cash for them. But the neighborhood would come together in the barn dance, that type of thing. But I don't remember ever. And of course, whenever there's a wedding or this type of thing, there'd be dances. But normally, I don't recall going, to dances. On Saturday night, if you went to anything, you'd probably go to a movie at the theater.
Is that something you did regularly?
Not very. No, we didn't attend too many movies. I don't know, for some reason it was basically, you went along with your parents doing whatever they did, or visited with cousins or whatever that were in town, this type of thing. the town wasn't that big, so you didn't get lost that easily. So it was.
Now, were any of your school friends in town that you would see?
Well, pretty much everybody would become, show up in town sometime or other that on Saturday night. Yeah, that was basically the shopping day for the community on Saturday night, at least for the farm kids, the farmers. I'm sure the people in town shopped whenever they needed to or wanted to. But the farm people pretty much came to town on Saturday.
Do you remember what kind of items your parents would end up buying on these shopping trips?
Well, just regular groceries, whatever the what we needed, and Mom needed cooking or whatever. Nothing particularly special, I don't think. Can't like I can't think of anything special or anything that stuck out.
Now, did your mom make clothes for you and your siblings, or did
Yes,
you?
she did. Mostly she sewed. She did a lot of sewing, and she was good at it. She did a good job of it. Yeah, she made a lot of clothing for us. So, so we were always, if we can. Of course, we did. You didn't have as many clothes as you guys these days. You didn't change your clothes every day like you do these days. Like I say, you took a bath basically once a week. So you may change clothes like on Wednesday or whatever. Of course, Mom did her laundry on Wednesday, so then we definitely changed clothes on Wednesday, because then we'd get everything cleaned up. Of course, Saturday and after the bath, you went to new clothes, this type of thing. So you probably changed, twice in the week. But like I say, Mom did sew a lot, and she was, she did a good job. Cut whatever made from patterns and this type of thing. She was always had her on her old sewing machine, which my sister has now. Still usable.
Now, did your mother hand wash your clothes, or did she?
No, we had a washing machine, a Maytag washing machine. But they were hung out to dry. They weren't put on a dryer. Even in the middle of winter time, you could be hung out on the clothesline. Bring them in, you could kill somebody with them. They were that hard.
How many outfits do you remember having? Do you remember having a specific number that she?
No, I don't remember that we a specific number. I mean, like I say, basically, we changed clothing on Wednesday night or twice a week probably. That was about it. But I don't. We always had enough as far as I can remember.
Now, when you were living on the farm, did you ever experience any isolation? Did you ever feel like you were too far away from town?
No, I don't think I've. Like I say, the family was always there, and the neighbors weren't that far away. Even in the wintertime, you could get to visit with neighbors. So I don't know. I remember that we were ever isolated. Of course, I don't think going to town was the thing that didn't isolate you. I mean, there were probably a lot more people living out in the country than there were in town in those days. So I think there was probably more things going on out in the country than in town.
You said Hayes was the closest town?
Hazen was the town, yeah. I think we went to Bismarck probably once a year.
What was that like?
Well, it was a big deal because that was before the interstate. You had the gravel road going to Bismarck. Usually, if you went to Bismarck, which was 80 miles away, you had you had people going with you, so that you weren't just a family. Later years, I know it was just a family, but early on, the aunt or uncle would probably drag you down there with you, and you'd basically spend the day. Sometimes then we'd end up going sightseeing to the Capitol or the museum or to the zoo or something like that. Of course, it was always a big deal, when you went to Bismarck. these days you jump in your car and you're done in an hour and a half or whatever, and it's it's a completely different thing.
Can you describe one of those trips? Maybe your favorite?
Well, like I say, it was just one of those things. I don't remember that I recall any special trips. But I know we used to go at the time. The road was we'd go from the home farm, and then we ended up New Salem was where they turned off to Bismarck. If you remember, if you're familiar with the North Dakota at all, and then you'd be on Highway 10, but it was gravel road. It was a big deal when you got to Bismarck because you went across that bridge, which was really something we hadn't seen or had much to do with. Then, like I said, we spent the time in Bismarck going to Sears and Montgomery Ward and those stores, Pennies. I mean, it was just a day in a different location.
Now, how did you get ready for those trips? Did you have to pack anything up? Was it just
No, I mean, I'm sure they sometimes took a little lunch along, but we normally ate in town, at least for dinner, this type of thing. Yeah, it was just a matter of, after doing your chores in the morning, you'd get in the car and take off. And so, like I said, but it was a trip because you weren't going 65 or 70 miles an hour. At the most you were probably going 25, 30 because you were on gravel roads type of thing, and they weren't good gravel roads either. They were, so it was a long trip.
Can you describe the roads to your farm, since we just touched on that a little?
Well, like I say, out to the farm, of course, they were not even gravel there. They were basically just county roads because the maintainer, the blade would go by every couple of weeks, just to clean up, clean up some of the potholes and this type of thing. But there was normally plenty of potholes and even rocks around. So I remember, changing a lot of flat tires over going to town. You end up doing this, end up hitting a nail or even the rock sometime and having to change a flat tire. So this type of thing. But it was one of the things that you dealt with when at that age or in those years. It was just that's the way it was.
Now, with the farm equipment, what kind of farm equipment did you use?
We always had International Harvester. That was the big deal. Dad was nothing but McCormick or International equipment. The first tractor that Dad had was an H International, and after he used that actually bought it. When he bought it, it had steel wheels on it, so you had to change it over to tires. And then I don't know when, probably in the 50s, he got a W9. It was a bigger tractor. We had you could plow up to five bottom plow on it. And of course, again, you don't know what I'm talking about, what that means. But on the H, you had probably 2 bottoms or 3 bottoms as far as plowing. On the W9, you had 5 bottoms, so that was quite a much stronger tractor. There's also a bear to steer. There's no power steering in those days, and the brakes, you really because I was out there at an early age, probably 12, 13, working that thing, and by the end of the day, you had your workout just steering and braking and whatever, just handling the tractor. It was hard work. Like I said, there's no power steering or anything, nothing power equipment on these old tractors. Then after that, then when we started getting some bigger tractors, again, 5, 6 inch, whatever, but they were always International Harvester. They got bigger as the years went on. So that type of thing, it expanded and could plow more or do in the later years use other equipment, diggers and whatever.
When did you first learn how to drive these large pieces of equipment?
Well, I don't remember. As soon as you were old enough to basically get on the tractor, you were able to do it, or were allowed to do it, or basically pretty much told to do it. Because I remember, cultivating a lot of corn. I wasn't all that old when I got on the H International, doing the cultivator on it and cultivated corn or worked summer fallow, this type of thing with a disc. So whatever, when you were old enough to or be able to handle it, you did it, type of thing.
Now, did you miss a lot of school, say in harvest season?
No, we never missed school. In fact, I think I've got some perfect attendance in there. I don't think I've ever missed very little school. We were never kept home for harvesting or anything like that.
Did you ever want to be kept home for harvesting?
Well, the school year at that time was 8 months, so it was a short year to begin with. So sometimes you probably couldn't. I'm sure the teachers weren't that happy with. They would have liked longer years. But I don't know that I felt that I wanted to stay at home or this type of thing, because it was probably better to be at school.
You said you drove the tractors. Did you drive anything else while helping out around the farm?
Well, truck and this type of thing. Yeah. Oh yeah, whatever was used, you drove, or as soon as you were big enough and old enough to move it, handle it.
Can you describe for us, please, the fields and crops on your family's farm?
The what?
The fields and the crops.
Well, like I said, we raised, wheat, grain, wheat, barley, oats. Later, afterwards, we raised durum, which is another wheat. Macaroni wheat is that. Of course, we always had corn, so it was just I don't know anything special about the crops. It was just that's what was raised in the area. That was the going thing that people all raised. Wheat was the king of the grains. That was the money crop. It still is in North Dakota.
Now, since you're living out on the farm,
Mm-hmm.
do you remember anything about your neighbors?
Our neighbors, we're not very. We had neighbors that were just about less than a quarter mile away that we could walk over to them. There's no big deal. The Millers that were there, and then of course the cousins, Ida and Arnold, my uncle and aunt, they lived just across the road from us. And there was farms basically within quarter of a mile, half a mile, all kinds of farms and mostly relatives. So there was it was nobody strange or anything that we didn't know.
Do you ever remember your neighbors looking after you when your parents were out of town?
If my parents ever went anywhere, we'd normally stayed with our grandparents. Our neighbors, I don't think ever took care of that I can remember ever. If we had anything like the mom and dad went somewhere overnight, we would stay normally with our grandparents.
Now, we touched on this a little bit earlier about your feelings towards, kids who lived in town,
Mm-hmm.
since they didn't have to do as much work as you did. What were farm kids' feelings towards town kids?
Well, like I say, we always had I'm sure all of us farm kids felt we were doing much more work, and I'm sure we were. It was harder work anyway. Moving, rocks and bales and whatever. So there was always the harder work, and of course, normally that showed up in the football or whatever. The farm kids were the tough guys, as far as that goes. Didn't need all the toughening up that the city kids did when they had to train and this type of thing. But yeah, I think it was just a matter of us thinking that we worked much harder at it, and probably we did as far as at least the heaviness of the work, this type of thing.
How about your family's attitude towards townspeople?
Well, I think that was basic. I don't know if that was any different from my own. It was just basically that. One of the derogatory terms, says Städtler, was he lives in town. in German, it basically means he's a town liver, lives in town, this type of thing.
Yeah. What were the positive aspects of growing up on a farm?
Well, I suppose learning to, work and this type of thing, getting to. It was a healthy life. Well, there was nothing, didn't kill us or anything like that. It was, it was. I don't. I mean, it's one of those things that I grew up there, and I just can't think of anything else as far as it being positive or negative, that type of thing. But it was a good life. We had plenty to eat. We had, plenty to keep us occupied. This type of thing.
Do you remember if there were places that your parents wouldn't let you go, or children that they wouldn't let you socialize with?
No, I don't recall ever having that. No.
And of course, with 3 siblings, did you have any that were married, and whose weddings you remember?
Well, not until later. I mean, they're all younger than myself. My, I remember my brother got married. Of course, in fact, I was I was his best man. I was at Hope, North Dakota. He married a gal from Hope. So I remember that wedding, being there and going to it. My sister, when she married in Hazen there. My brother, my brother in his first marriage, or even his second marriage, I never got to either one, so I don't know.
Did they have traditional weddings?
Yeah, well, as weddings go, I mean, nothing special about it. They were just, it's regular weddings. Of course, the
German Russian heritage?
no, well, my sister-in-law is English, carpenter, so from Hope, so that was basically a traditional American wedding. I don't know if that was anything special about my sister's wedding. I mean, she married a German Russian from Dickinson, but I don't recall that it was anything special. At least not to me. It was the way I always saw weddings at home. They're just a typical. I mean, other than, and of course, they had the wedding, and of course then have a meal, and then after that go into a dance, this type of thing. So just, I don't know, anything special about it. It was just that's the way weddings were done in those days.
Now you mentioned dancing at the wedding. How did that work? Did they have a band come in and play?
Yes, there's always a band. Yeah, there was a local, and then there's some really good local bands up in that area that provided music, the old time, waltzes, polkas and whatever, so the old time dances, and people, the whole neighborhood would be in and dance, and of course there was always liquor being served. Of course, German Russians have what they call red eye, or they take sugar and roast it, and then they make what they call red eye, and it goes down really good, and it hits the bottom sometimes. Because I remember my cousin out there walking around a post for a while, because it sneaks up on you. But it was one of the things. I remember I guess I don't remember. I guess my sister's wedding was at Town Hall there in Hazen. That's where they had the dance. So we had my brother when they got married up at Hope. There wasn't a dance there, but several weeks later, when they were out at Hazen, we had a barn dance at home there. That the neighborhood would come, because not everybody had come here to the east to the wedding. So then that was their way of taking part in the wedding, with the dance.
Was that a usual occurrence?
Well, if the wedding was held somewhere else, yeah, that was sometimes done, yeah.
So what would they call those dances?
Well, it was basically the wedding dance, but it may have been a week or so after the wedding, and at a different location. So that was, the way, just basically to let the people celebrate, they hadn't been there, type of thing. And we had a big barn with a big hay mow that cleaned it out, and then they had a dance up there.
So did they ever call those barn dances, or was that?
Well, yeah, barn dance, whatever you want to call it. In Germany, would probably say Hochzeit dance, which is the wedding dance, whatever.
Do you remember if there were any traditional food served at weddings?
Well, you normally, I know one of the things, but I don't know that there was, one traditional food normally served, sometimes served at weddings was noodle soup, this type of thing. But I don't remember any of that being, but normally just, potato salad and, probably, ham sandwiches, this type of thing, whatever, and, probably ice cream or something, Really, it wasn't normally that big a meal, because, you had a lot of relatives to come in to feed. And so I don't think, but just basically, I know that you always normally had potato salad or sandwiches, this type of thing. And I'm sure there was other, Jello and whatever, some things like that. Kuchen, of course, Germans can't eat without Kuchen.
Now, what is kuchen?
Well, it's a pastry that like a pie type, with with what am I trying to say? With filling and whatever, and then it's very. I don't have any. You can ask Michael too, and I'm sure he'll explain it. You can go to Hornbarkers and buy some kuchen. They sell it at the store. Mom baked good kuchen. Because you always have the wedding cake, of course. That was always served.
Now, was that something your mother would make, or a family member?
Well, normally somebody that was a good cake baker in the area would do because those were usually big cake, wedding cakes, that type of thing. Yeah, and it wasn't my mother. It was normally somebody in the neighborhood that did that. Basically that was good at baking would make the wedding cake and this type of thing. So yeah, there's always somebody that did that. Was an expert at it, whatever. Of course, decorating them and whatever. They looked nice, and most of them tasted good.
Can you please tell us about the health care that was available when you were growing up?
Well, there wasn't anything. Didn't get any shots until I was in the army. So we were basically pretty healthy. I remember getting as a kid going to the doctor because I had tonsillitis, and that's the only time I remember ever going to a doctor as a kid. There was only, I think, just the one doctor in town there. There was no hospital then, at least not until later years in Hazen. In fact, when I was born, there was no hospital. There were some people in town that would board a woman, until the baby was born, this type of thing. But yeah, the only time, like I say, I ever remember going to the hospital was when that had a tonsillitis. I don't remember that ever being a common occurrence. Of course, we all had our I never had any mumps, but measles and chickenpox and this type of thing. If everybody in the neighborhood shared those things in a school. One kid in school got them, everybody got them, this type of thing. But we never, we basically, those were treated at home, by the family. Never any medical things done with that. And like I say, as far as vaccinations I never had any of those until I got into the military.
And how old were you when you had tonsillitis?
Oh, I suppose I was 6 or 7 years old, that type of thing.
Did your mother or father do any at-home cures, or did they home remedies when you were sick?
No, other than, you had a cold, this type of thing, you may take some honey and hot whiskey, this type of thing, made you feel much better, But that was about the only thing I recall. I don't think that we did anything special otherwise. Of course, I don't remember being that sick or getting sick that often. We were a pretty healthy group as far as the family goes. We did have about once a year they would go. The dad and mom would go to Reverend Heipel, who was you guys would he did bone doctoring, this type of thing. He was a pastor at Hebron, and he would set bones, this type of thing. And I remember as a kid one time we were out picking rocks, and we ran across my foot with a load of rocks, and pretty much wheezed it all out of shape. And they took me to Heipel. He said that he felt it. He said he had 2 cracked toes, but he twisted it and said it, and I never did get to see a doctor other than him for that, and I've had no trouble with it to this day.
During your childhood, did you ever visit a dentist?
Yeah, we sometimes, not very often. I think I remember going to this probably twice as a child, and I don't remember. I don't know if I had any. If I got any fillings at that age, I don't think. I don't think I had any fillings until I got in the service.
And during your childhood, did you ever visit an eye doctor?
No. My younger brother, he was cross-eyed when he was there, so he had glasses. But the rest of us, mom and dad had glasses. But us, we never went to a dentist or to an eye doctor. Not until in later years when I was on my own that I got to an eye doctor.
And did anyone in your family pass away during your childhood?
Well, we always had great grandparents, this type of thing that I remember passing on. But and I'm sure there was other funerals. I don't remember, but I remember. I guess I don't remember. I guess we went to our great grandparents when they died, but I don't have much remembering very much of it.
Is there anything else you would like to add about healthcare or funerals?
Not really. I guess wasn't that nothing in the top of my list that I wanted to bring out, or that's stuck in my mind that much. I really don't recall.
Now, when you were in the Army, how long were you away from the farm?
Well, I was basically I enlisted, so that means for 3 years. But I got back, I think, a month or two early. So I had, gone to 61. I went to the military, and then I was 63 when I came back. I did get home to visit, as you saw some of those pictures. When after basic at Fort Carson, we had 2 weeks off leave, and then from there I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, for my second or the second advanced training, and then from there I went to Germany via ship.
Now, while you were in Germany, you said you were able to catch up with family members.
Yes, in fact, when I was at home after the first 8 weeks in Germany, I already knew that I was going to be stationed in Germany. So grandfather Knell had written his his relatives in Germany that I was going to be coming, so they were kind of expecting me already before I even got to Germany. Because they, like I say, basically, this was right after the Berlin crisis type of way, stuff you guys don't know anything about again. But there had been a Berlin crisis, and so at that time, pretty much everybody in the military was being sent to Germany, stationed in Germany for quite a while there.
And you were stationed in Berlin the whole time?
No, I was stationed in Munich, Munich. Well, not all the time, but because I took class in Augsburg, which is about 30 miles to the west of Munich.
Now, was it just was it your paternal grandfather's side that you visited while you were
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure well, in fact, I found later on that there's some other relatives over there, but those are the only ones that I remember because they were in Russia until 1940, and then they were resettled to Germany. So they were, we knew where they were at and this type of thing. And of course, my cousin Dwayne had already been, I think, in Germany, and he had visited these people earlier than I did, so he had visited visit them, and so it was kind of interesting. I had talked to him, visited with him, and talked to about those people, so it was kind of, I had some knowledge of what they were and where they were and this type of thing. But again, the language was no problem. We spoke German at home, and there was no problem speaking to them, communicating with them.
Did you ever have any problems in school transitioning between German and English?
Well, pretty much everybody was German. In fact, even I remember when I started school, the teacher was one of the girls from the neighborhood, so she was German. I mean, but of course we, weren't allowed to speak German at school. And if we did, of course, then sometimes you'd end up standing in the corner, this type of thing, to discipline you for it. But it was one of the things that I never realized how much of an accent I have until I was in high school and I took a speech course and it was taped and they played it back, the next class that, what I sounded like. Because everybody sounded like that, everybody had the brogue or whatever, the dialect, the accent, this type of thing.
Did you feel like being bilingual helped you or hindered you?
Well, I think it helped. I mean, it was a nice way to be able to speak two languages. I mean, I've never had a problem communicating with anybody. I wish I could speak a couple more languages. It'd be nice. But no, I had no problem. In most cases, like I say, it was helpful because I could translate to whatever. So, and I've done that, when I was in Germany, and I've done it for our society, even translating articles and this type of thing. So it's been very helpful, I think.
And while you were in school, did you ever get in trouble for speaking German? Maybe accidentally?
Well, I'm sure that we spend some time standing in the corner, this type of thing, but I don't recall that anything stands out as far as we went out of our way to be nasty about it, or
And how did the teachers treat those that did?
Well, like I say, most times the teacher was local, so they more than likely spoke German or were German background. So I don't think it was ever that much of a big deal. I mean, it's just that you're in English school now, you speak English, this type of thing. We're in Hutterites where you had your German school, type of thing. We did, and sometimes in Sundays, in the vacation Bible school, that we take some German, learning the alphabet and this type of thing there. But that was a different thing altogether. That was church school.
Can you describe church school?
Well, we had basically 2 weeks normally in the summertime when we went to at the church. But there was had a schoolhouse there, so we would have the Bible classes, and like I say, some of us that were more into German did learn a little bit of German from the German Fibel, the alphabet book and this type of thing. But it was basically a vacation Bible school, that type of thing that a lot of churches have, I think, in the summertime. It's, of course, out in the country.
What was the attendance?
Well, pretty much whatever the kids from the church. I don't know, had 20 or 30 kids, I suppose. It was because it was a bigger community than for the grade school, because the area was larger.
What was your most stressful childhood experience?
I don't know that I can't recall having anything like that. I mean, it's just that everything was pretty much normal. I don't recall having, probably other than having them run across my foot with rocks. I probably that was very stressful. I, that was just one of those things that happened.
What is your happiest childhood memory?
Yeah, again, I don't really recall any highs and lows in that regard. I mean, that it was spectacular or whatever. I don't recall. That was anything that sticks out.
How about what the most adventurous thing you did during your childhood? Can you pinpoint any one experience that was the most adventurous?
I Everything was pretty normal. I think there was nothing that great as far as things going on. I remember one time walking across the water tank that had just been pumped full of water and falling in, that type of thing. But I mean, that's a big adventure. I got all wet. But they had, a pole. There was a 2x4 across, and of course you just to walk across like a circus performer, and I didn't make it. And like I say, the water had just been pumped, so it was colder than the dickens.
What time of year was that?
That was the summertime.
What about adventures you maybe got caught in with your siblings? Maybe doing something you shouldn't have on the farm?
Yeah, well, I guess again, I'm sure they always did something we weren't supposed to, but I don't remember if there's anything that outstanding that was memorable at all.
Well, is there anything else about your childhood memories that you want to add?
No, I don't think so. It was a long time ago. Let's put it that way.
Now, in conclusion, why do you think it's important to tell your life story?
Well, all of us will, have a history, and I guess once you pass on, it's basically gone. Nobody else knows it but you. So I guess it's like these veterans or whatever, if they tell their story, and otherwise it won't be a part of the history at all. It'll just be their history, their adventures, and this type of thing. So they need to be put down, I guess, so that people have some idea what went on, and like I say, make it part of the general history. So, and I don't sure there's nothing that I'm saying was going to be that outstanding here either. It's just that it's my history or my family's history type of thing.
So do you think that in future your family members will access these resources in some way?
Well, I'm the only one in the family that wrote the family histories, this type of thing. So they're always interested in after it's being done. So this type of thing, some of them might. Don't know how much the younger folks will be interested. How these younger kids are. They're not too much interested in some of the history type of thing. So it's probably my siblings more than anybody, because it's part of their history, and some of theirs at least overlap, this type of thing. I mean, now we all have our own stories, but and our own recollections, this type of thing. But it's still the general history the same.
Are there any other thoughts or observations you would like to share?
Nothing that comes to mind, no.